Good morning. My name is George Rowe. I'm Chief Instructor of George Rowe and Associates. And over the years, we've talked about different theories of defensive shooting. And a comment that I have used regularly is I believe in what I call reality-based defensive shooting. Now, everybody and every other instructor out there, I'm sure, is going to say, well, of course, that's what I do as well. Well, maybe. I'm not going to be accountable for what they do, but let me tell you what I do and what I teach. As an example, many schools base their instruction on everything being done at 7 yards, 21 feet. Now, as an example, I'm going to start walking backwards. And I'm going to ask my photographer here, Mike, when I get to what you think is 21 feet, tell me to stop, okay?
Sure.
So here I go, folks.
That looks about right.
Okay, now I'm a Chicago boy. Picture this situation. You're on the street. Can you envision at this range the bad guy ever saying, "Give me your wallet"? It's not going to happen. But what will happen is this. You're standing there on the street, and that guy is going to get very close up and personal in your face, and you got any change? You got a cigarette? What time is it? Or give me your wallet. Thus, if you look at the famous FBI statistics in shooting, over the years we've heard of the so-called 3-3-3 rule. And what that says is that the average civilian gunfight takes place at a range of, now stay with me here, less than 3 yards, last less than 3 seconds, and less than 3 shots are fired. And if you think about it from a civilian defensive shooting perspective, it makes tremendous sense. Thus, when I'm training my students in defensive shooting, typically the most important range for me with the student is typically that 3 to 4 yard range. We can splurge and go to 5, but typically not that often. Now, what would happen would be as follows. You're on the street. I'm going to move up towards our silhouette target here as if this is our bad guy. Now, as you all know, at least I hope you know, there's 3 types of sight pictures you can use. One is what we call point shooting. Now, in some circles, especially if you look at the old Jeff Cooper model, point shooting is heresy. You don't use that language in front of decent people. Point shooting is just what it sounds like. You're pointing your weapon at the target. You're not looking at your weapon. You're not looking at the sights. The best way to train to do point shooting, frankly, is to put tape over your sights so you don't look. That's point shooting. Second method is what we call flash sighting. And a flash sight is where all you're looking at and concentrating on is your front sight. Not the rear sight, not the target, just the front sight, which will be on your target. And of course, lastly, what most of you are familiar with is what we call aimed fire. This is your traditional marksmanship type of positioning, where you're worrying about sight alignment, sight picture, and that sort of thing. Now, they all have a legitimate place, in my opinion, in defensive shooting. There are some instructors who will disagree with that. They're entitled to their view. This is my view. When we're talking this type of range, where you have a bad guy who is within bad breath distance, arm's length, typically, my opinion, and what I teach my students, is this is a point shooting environment. More so, understand what we're trying to accomplish. And for students who have been trained in traditional marksmanship, this is the hardest thing to understand. If I come up here, here is your X ring. So you've been taught if you're good and you watch lots of TV, all of your shots should be right in that X. Really? Well, maybe, but the reality is as follows. First, in a defensive environment, what's the mission? Is the mission to kill the aggressor? No, never. Hopefully you'll never have to do that. As my students know from our basic protection classes, the most important thing is first try to avoid any conflict. If you can't avoid it, can you evade the attacker? Can you escape? Avoid, evade, and escape. Only if those all fail do we now look at a situation where we may have to resort to deadly force. The mission is never to kill. The mission is to stop the threat. Thus, how many rounds should you shoot into the assailant? I don't know. Is the threat continuing? If so, you're probably going to keep up your rate of fire. Only on television does a one-shot hit stop a guy. Real life, very unusual. So we got to bear all of this in mind as we're progressing forward here. More so, what is the most common cause of death of a person shot with a handgun? They bleed to death. Thus, if we're coming back here and I go bang, 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 I've opened one wound channel about that big. Is that good? Maybe. If I hit here, 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 and here, I've now opened 5 wound channels, all of which are exsanguinating, all of which are bleeding. Probably a better shot of this fellow stopping in that scenario. The point of this that I'm trying to make, especially for those who have been traditionally trained via marksmanship, is the mission is stop the threat. It's not creating this very nice little group. I would go further and tell you that if you shoot that nice tight group, you're shooting too slowly. Now, this business of accuracy and speed is always an issue. One of my heroes was Wyatt Earp. And when he was asked about winning gunfights, he had various one-liners. But one of the best was, in a gunfight, you have to learn to go slow in a hurry. Or as I've told some of my students, you can't miss fast enough to make up for a hit. You progress slowly, speed will come as you practice. And remember, the mission is stop the threat. So for those who are traditionally trained in marksmanship, you keep thinking that nice tight group is good. No, it may not be. It says to me you're shooting too slowly. Typically, at this range, for instance, if we're talking, say, a 3-yard range, on this type of B-27, it's called actually B-27E, cut out the bottom economy because I'm cheap, anything within the 9-10 ring I'm totally happy with. If you look how these things are actually scored, 8, 9, 10, or X ring are all worth 5 points if you were shooting qualification. Why? Because any of these shots is going to be disabling, if not fatal, to the bad guy. Thus, if you hit him here or here, does it really make a difference? Probably not. So again, this is a concept you got to play with, especially if you're accustomed to, but my group is not tight. May not be. Now, if we start having shots, you know, here and here, well, then we got to work on your marksmanship a bit. But anyway, to recap, reality training for me is to reflect what I think, for a civilian, is the most common and probable scenario that you're going to confront on the street. Okay, now, what we're going to do is give you an idea as to how the actual live fire of that situation may go. And we'll take a break and come right on back. Okay, welcome back. And now what I'm going to do is a simple demonstration of a defensive shoot at what I consider, again, the reality range. That bad guy typically within 3 yards or closer. Now what I'm going to do is use a two-handed grip, but you're going to see where my students hopefully learn whatever you can do two-handed, I want you to be able to do one-handed as well. Okay, it would look something like this. I'm on the street, the bad guy has approached me. He's asked for my wallet or whatever, he has a weapon. I will typically come to this surrender position, hands up. That usually will stop the bad guy. He's looking. Then I'm going to come down here. Here's my wallet. And then I'm going to draw, present, and fire. Okay? That's what we're going to do here. Now, in live fire, here's what that would look like. Bad guy comes up. Give me a while. Sure, I'm sorry, no problem. And I have fired my 2 shots. Now note, you can see where these 2 shots went. As one of my more advanced students points out to me regularly, that group is too tight, I'm too slow. Well, maybe. I use a double tap, which is 2 very fast shots. You don't have to. Sometimes you will fire more. Again, the mission is to stop the threat. Any questions so far? Okay, very good. Why don't we pause for a moment? Okay, hopefully you understand now what I mean when I speak of reality training and reality range. We can go back much further if you want to talk marksmanship, that's fine. But for my students who are interested primarily in not just surviving but overcoming that street encounter, this is what I do, and this is the way I do it. Not for everybody. A lot of other instructors may disagree, but that's what I do, and that's why I do it. Thanks for listening.